the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
So welcome back in. I'm your host, Terry Barr. The Grind to Growth to Greatness is the podcast we do. And we talk about interesting people, their journeys to their success. Normally, we talk about that journey more than we do the actual success. Today, we have somebody that I've been looking forward to interviewing for about 6 weeks. I took a flyer, I sent her an email, and she said yes. So I'm very excited. It just so happens that she is the newly minted president and CEO of our company, Coldwell Banker Realty. I am an agent with Coldwell Banker, and so I'm very excited to connect those dots and really talk about her leadership, her style, what she's going to bring to Coldwell Banker. She brings a lot of history, over 20 years of history in our industry. She also started out in the men's and women's accessory category with eBay.com, where she fell in love with the luxury side of things. And so we're excited to kind of jump right in and talk to her about her path. She spent some time at Sotheby's. She was president of the brokerage at Sotheby's. She was president of the West for Compass. And she's just a really, really accomplished lady at a very young age. We're very excited to talk with her. Her name is Kamini Lane, and we just couldn't be more happy to have her on. So, Kamini, thanks for doing this. We know we've got short time. We come into a time where hurricanes are hitting some of our southeast, and really doing a lot of damage, a lot of loss of life. The NRA lawsuit, and then obviously you're jumping right into something that's right in the middle of the presidential election. So you've bit off a lot, and from what I've read, you're just positive and you're ready to go to tackle this. We've got a great legacy brand, so you have that going for you, and I'm sure that you're going to bring a vision to our brand that's going to be outstanding. So, Kamini Lane, welcome into our show.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, I want to just jump right in, and for context, I want to talk a little bit about your family. So, I'd like you to give us kind of the background, if you would, where you grew up in the country, and all about your family, so we can just kind of start there.
Yeah, amazing. So I grew up in a Southern California beach town called Torrance. It is a suburb of Los Angeles, sort of pseudo-famous for being a movie and television set, in addition to being kind of a nice sort of typical middle-class Southern California suburb. Right. Both my parents were born and raised in India, in South India to be precise. My father was born and raised in Chennai, and my mom in Bangalore. And my dad moved to this country as most people moved from India to the U.S., in the kind of 60s and 70s to pursue higher education.
Right.
And my mom, and so that was in like the late 60s. And my mom came in 1975 after they got married, and they ended up settling down in Torrance, and they had me and my older sister. She is 3 years older than me.
Okay.
And I have to say, I think, I feel really blessed. It was a really great upbringing. I am actually still very, very close to my friends from childhood. I have a group of girlfriends, and we, some of us have been friends since 4th grade, 6th grade, literally since we were tiny, tiny kids. And we are still incredibly close. I actually just saw them last week. We have dinner about once a month, and we go on girls' trips. My sister has 2 older kids, and they're her kids and my older one are good friends. That's and, nice. I think in a lot of ways, my upbringing was sort of fairly typical of what you would imagine from an Indian family, right? Okay. Very, very focused on education, and very focused on doing well in school and, achieving. But I think I was perhaps uniquely lucky in that my parents never made me feel pressured. It never felt like a burden. It never felt like, a stressful thing that I had to get straight A's. I think what my parents made me feel was that I could do anything, that I really, if I put my mind to it, the sky was the limit for me. And so instead of kind of feeling the pressure to achieve, I felt like I sort of had limitless possibility and potential. And that was really empowering at a very young age.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I live in a neighborhood with there's a large Indian culture here, and I get to talk to my neighbors, and the kids are very focused on education, and I think that's great, and I think it's important. I get concerned about the pressure that parents put on, and when we started getting a high contingent of the Indian families coming into our area, I went to one of my colleagues that was of Indian origin. And I said, hey, can you sit down and tell me about your past? Tell me about your culture so I can understand. I'm getting these clients and I need to understand how the Indian culture works. And so that was very helpful. And, he mentioned that, we're all about education. We're all about, either in the north, you're either from the north or the south, and one's medical and one's IT. And I mean, kind of shot the generalities all over the place.
Yeah.
But it was very helpful to understand that. And when you're dealing with neighbors, you understand how they think. And I think that could be a tough thing for, especially, parents that immigrate. And then all of a sudden, you have American kids, and now they've got to balance that between Southern California, which is another place that's crazy, but it's awesome. And then with the culture of India, I mean, that's got to be quite the mix for you.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I think I grew up with my Indian heritage being very prominent in my daily life. My mom cooked Indian food very frequently. She's a phenomenal cook. I took my whole family down. She lives about an hour south of where we are now, just so that we can all have lunch at her house on Sunday. So I grew up with, Indian food and culture, frequent trips to India being part of kind of the fabric of my childhood. I did Indian classical dance for my entire childhood. Okay. I would, go to practices twice a week and perform in big theaters. But I will say that part of my life didn't really blend with my school life and my school friends. And it was almost like there were two sort of separate pieces of my life, both of which I think I got a lot from, but it's not like they were sort of integrated and melded in the same way that I see for my children, my older daughter in particular. I have an almost 8-year-old and a 1-year-old. And for my older daughter, her Indian heritage is very much part of her daily life. I mean, it is incorporated into her school. We have Diwali, which is coming up, which is it's the Festival of Lights. Right. Shortcut is sort of the Indian New Year.
They're going up all over my neighborhood. Yeah, all the lights are going up. So yeah,
all over, right? And when I was growing up, that definitely was not a thing. Nobody at my school knew what Diwali was. But for my daughter Leela, the Diwali celebration at her school is one of the most fun days of the year. And so it's great to see that, I'm kind of carrying that Indian heritage forward, but in a slightly different way than when I grew up.
It was interesting. The first time I mentioned to my neighbor, how do you feel about Vastu? And he's like, you know about Vastu? I was like, well, I know about this much, but it was important to know something about it. And he's like, oh, okay. So we had a nice conversation about, the Indian yin and yang, or, whatever that is and how that works. But it is an interesting thing how, they generally keep to themselves, but I see all their culture in the neighborhood. The ladies will dance in the garage with each other, and they get a kick out of me because I dance when I go on my walks. I dance by with them, and we have a great time with it. But it is an interesting thing to watch the cultures mix. So your mom and dad, from what I read, and I did all my research online, but from what I read, your mom and dad were a huge part of not only your life, but it seemed like they were a huge part of encouraging you. And you mentioned that a little bit. And I got a couple quotes that they said, but one of the interesting ones, tell me about your mom and dad and how they fit in to your future, how they did back then.
I think really the biggest thing is that they encouraged me to work hard, to achieve above and beyond, And I will say, there was a piece of that was pushing me. I mean, it sounds sort of ridiculous, especially now that I have a daughter in second grade. But
Yeah.
when I was in kindergarten, my mom arranged for me to go to first grade math and second grade English classes. And that continued my entire educational career. When I was in seventh grade, I would take a bus, a full-sized school bus with just me on it, to the high school to take math classes, advanced math classes.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I would miss geography. I remember this so clearly. I would attend the first sort of 10 minutes of geography in seventh grade, and then I would have to leave and get on a bus and go to the high school.
Do trigonometry.
To do trigonometry,
There you
literally
go.
to do trigonometry.
Okay.
And then I would come back. And to this day, my U.S. geography is absolutely horrendous. Ask me where Minnesota is on a map, and I could not.
You couldn't tell me.
But I did trigonometry in seventh grade. So, there's a piece of that was just, I learned to push myself, right? To really see what I was capable of if I really worked hard. And, my parents backed me.
At what point did you transition from mom and dad kind of like nudging you out the door to, you know what? I think one of the quotes I read was your mom said, if you can do it, you should. Mm-hmm. And I thought, yeah, if I can do it, I should. And at what point did you when did that resonate with you and said, I can do this, I'm going to go do it?
That's such a great question. I don't think I ever really felt like they were pushing me out the door. I think I felt like I had these opportunities because they created, my mom really to a large degree, created these opportunities for me. And I think that was complemented by the fact that my dad ingrained in me at a very young age that you had to love what you did, right?
Yeah.
There was no point at which my dad hated his job. It just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
He was very passionate about the work that he did. He was an engineer and a scientist. He was always inventing, he was always innovating. And so there was sort of this combination of love for life and pursuing passions and achieving and accomplishing. Yeah. So I think I felt the kind of seeds of internalizing that thought of, if I can, I should, at a pretty early age.
Yeah.
And then I think that was sort of complemented by another little bit of life lesson. When I was I think I was a sophomore in college.
Okay.
Yes, I was a sophomore in college. I went to UC Berkeley for my undergraduate studies, and I applied to the business school. So the Haas School of Business, one of the best business undergraduate and graduate business programs in the U.S., very competitive. So you had to apply to get into UC Berkeley.
Yep.
And then in your sophomore year, you had to apply to get into the business school. And only about, at that time, it was maybe 25% of kids got in. So there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
And, I was kind of talking to my mom about what might I do if I did not get into the school. And, then I sort of was second guessing myself. I said, maybe I should go pursue the sciences. I should go get a degree in psychology and, maybe go to med school. And she said, you're not great at science and you're a little bit squeamish. So what's the plan there? How are you going to get through biology?
Isn't it nice for moms to know about you? They know what you're good at and what you're not. That's awesome. Yeah.
And she said, I think you should really think about not only what you might theoretically enjoy, but what you're actually going to be good at. And I don't think that's something that people are encouraged to think about as early as they should. We all have natural inclinations, right? We all have things that we are naturally better at, that we lean into, that we don't avoid. And we all have things that inevitably we procrastinate against, or we feel like we're just struggling uphill. And I'm not saying that you should not pursue something just because it doesn't come easy. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah,
but I think it's good to be conscious of the stuff that comes a little bit more easily.
I think it's good advice, because I think our kids today, and we can sit here and talk about kids all day long, because I think our kids today are like, well, I don't, even my sons, I have 2 adult sons and they live in Arizona. It's like, I don't want to do anything that I hate. I want to do something I love. Well, that's okay to a certain degree. But if you're getting a degree in something that doesn't pay the bills, well, maybe you need to think a little bit harder about that. But kids today are, I want to do something that I'm going to love for the rest of my life. And I appreciate that. I just wonder how many of those things are out there for, the vast majority of kids. And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer or whatever, but I'm just saying it. There's not a lot of people that have the opportunity or the intellectual capital to do really most anything they want. But one of the things that your dad said, and you can correct me, one of the articles that I read, and I pondered on this little statement for a while, and he didn't say enjoy what you do. He didn't say do something that you enjoy. He said expect joy from your work. Mm-hmm. And that was a quote that I saw in one of the articles, and I hope it's right. I hope I got it right, because that meant something to me. Expect joy from your work. There's an expectation when you go to work. Let's expect something good to happen. Let's expect, joy out of it. Let's expect, especially in our business, expect to help somebody. So tell me about Dad and his role versus Mom's role. Was he kind of the same encourager, or did he have a more direct way of talking to you?
Very direct. My dad was, he passed away almost exactly 6 years ago. Smartest man I have ever encountered. And in fact, the smartest man that most people had ever encountered, which is pretty, saying a lot.
Amazing. Yeah.
And also just an absolute ray of sunshine. I mean, he always had a smile on his face, and was just a really kind, interesting person, also very funny. He was incredibly well read. There was not a topic that you could ask him about that he did not know how to have an hour-long conversation on.
That's amazing.
Yes, it really was amazing. And I remember as a child, actually as a later child, right, teenager or early adult, thinking, where does he have the time to amass all of this knowledge? And, as a working adult now, I really do wonder.
Where do you put it, right? And that's in the 70s, right? Nowadays, you can carry a phone around with apps and books and all that stuff. Back then, you had to sit down and read it and absorb it.
Right? Yeah. But he was very direct, very no BS, and for him, it was sort of just expected, right? There was no fanfare about really any of it. It was just, hey, I'm proud of you, and you've got to work hard, and anything you ever need in your entire life, I will be there for you. And that is what goes without saying, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it was a great foundation.
That's wonderful. Now, can you trace that back to Grandma and Grandpa, your grandparents? I mean, did Dad get that from Grandpa and Grandma, or is that something that he just was like, this is him, this is who he is?
I don't know the answer to
Not
that.
sure.
My dad's dad was a freedom fighter with Mahatma Gandhi.
How about that?
He fought for India's independence. In fact, for a very long time, until I had kids, I only had one framed photo in my home, and it was a photo of my paternal grandfather and Mahatma Gandhi.
That's amazing.
And unfortunately, he passed away when my dad was pretty young. I think my dad was in his early 20s when my grandfather passed away. But I do know that the sort of sense of work ethic and really doing something that you believed so deeply in came from that, as you might imagine. And I think that's been kind of a formative story in our family history.
Well, that sounds like a paternal gene that's been passed down. I don't want to get too far off track, but I know that you're passionate about a few things, and if we have time, we'll get to some of those. But maybe that's a gene that was passed down from great grandfather and his desire to do something bigger than ourselves, and that's literally the reason I do the podcast, because I want people to hear the story of others and try to gain a little morsel of something out of it. But I want to move on. I want to talk about business a little bit. I know you're newly minted, let's call it that, 2023. You're getting your feet on the ground. You've been thrust right into everything that's going on in our business, and it's amazing. But I want to talk to you about what you hold valuable day to day, either who you hold valuable day to day, or what you use as an anchor on your day-to-day life as an executive at a high level.
Well, my anchor on my day-to-day is my husband, Peter.
Okay. Yeah.
He's we were just talking about my dad being the smartest man that most people met. My husband's the smartest man that I've ever met.
Peter number 2, right? He's number 2.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
He's second smartest guy you ever known.
Yeah, exactly. My dad would have loved him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is my anchor.
Okay.
my reason, right? We all talk about our why. What's our
Yeah.
purpose? Why are we here on this earth? What is the thing that both grounds us and drives us? For
Yeah.
me, it is my family.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough to marry someone who, not only gives me purpose, but also gives me phenomenal advice and, can be really honest with me and sees my blind spot. He and I are very different, very,
Mm.
very different. And we think differently. But he's a wonderful listener, and he is
Ah,
able to kind of take in what I am sharing with him, connect the dots of 100 other things that I've shared with him,
yeah.
and give me really good advice or direction or just things to think about. And so I talk to him a lot about work,
Mm.
but I think that extends to, my other kind of why is people, right? And we
Yeah.
are a people business. I think
Sure.
it is truly my favorite thing about real estate is that real estate agents and then, real estate leaders have the ability to change and influence the lives of countless people. In my role as the CEO of Coldwell Banker Realty, we have 52,000 real estate agents.
Right.
Each of those agents has many clients, and they are helping those clients in the most important financial and emotional decision of their lives, right? I mean, buying or selling a home is so formative for people.
Yeah.
From a financial standpoint, it's where the majority of Americans hold the vast majority of their equity.
Right.
It is their stability, and
Mm.
it's where you live. It's where you put down roots. It's where you raise, many people raise families. And so in this role, I get to have the honor of being able to have a positive impact on countless people's lives.
Yeah.
And, I really think that people are amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone has endless possibility and potential. And so
Yeah.
it's just a question of, how can I create a company that really has the right framework and the right tools and the resources to unleash and unlock everyone's potential?
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to reverse course a little bit, just a second. You talked about, and then I want to get back into that, but you talked about your husband Peter,
Mm-hmm.
and how he listens to you and really kind of takes all the information and then spits it back out to you in a form that makes sense and good advice and all those things. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
comments that you made in one of your your interviews, and they ask, what's your superpower, or what are you good at,
Mm-hmm.
and or what's your advice, and you said listen even when you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite understand that. I mean, I thought about it for a while, but I think that is part and parcel of what we do as agents. We
Yes.
listen, and then we talk, and we look for feedback, and we listen, and then we talk some more. And tell me about that. Tell me about that
Yeah.
comment in a nutshell, what it means to you.
So specifically what I meant by listen even when you're talking is that
Mm-hmm.
people are giving you cues about what's important to them, what they want to hear
Right.
more about, what they want to hear less about. They're telling you that they're tuned out even when they're not talking, right?
You
And so
bet.
when you're speaking, you have to care about what's landing and what's not. And that is just as important to me as actively listening when someone else is speaking.
That's
So
great.
many people are just waiting for their turn to talk. And
Amen.
I think they think that no one notices. Everyone notices. Everyone notices,
It's the
right?
truth. It's the truth. I had just a side note. I had a guest, Surgeon General of Arkansas. He was the Ryder Cup doctor. He happens to be a friend of mine, and he got on. I was so excited to have him on. And every question, I just couldn't wait for his answer. I just had to say something. And so
Mm.
actually, after it was over, I emailed him. I said, look, I was just too excited to have you. But it's true. We all want to talk before we listen. And I think our perception of what's going on around us is so helpful in the deal, in our relationships, and everything that goes around us. But so I totally agree, and I've been guilty of that. One of the companies you worked for, or it was either one of the companies that you worked for, or was Liz Bentley,
Mm-hmm.
said that you've been called a visionary,
Mm.
and you held one of the first national sales meetings with, I think it was Compass, that was online. As far as your vision as a visionary, taking on the role as president and CEO of Coldwell Banker Realty, how have you developed that vision, and how are you going to implement it and help it support over 52,000 agents and in 55 different markets? I'm just curious what your thought process was there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about being a visionary, but I think, what I do have is a vision for this industry and Coldwell Banker Realty's place in the industry. We are a brand with 118 years of history and heritage, which I think is our biggest strength and our biggest opportunity, because I think we have a name that is beloved and known and stands for integrity and trust. And we have an enormous opportunity to use that as a launching pad for innovation, and for really being on the bleeding edge of where this industry is going. And I believe that being a real estate agent is such an honorable profession. To be the steward in that most important financial and emotional transaction in someone's life can be life-changing for people.
Sure.
And Coldwell Banker the brand Coldwell Banker has stood for ethics and integrity and true professionalism, and being a trusted advisor rather than a transaction broker since its inception over 100 years ago, when the company was started by two guys. People don't realize this: a guy named Coldwell and a guy named Banker, who started it after the fires in San Francisco that left many people homeless and vulnerable because they didn't know how to get into a new home. And there were so many sharks in the market at that time, so many people who were trying to take advantage of vulnerable people. And when I think about fast forward that origin story to where we are now, so much is changing, and we have an opportunity to be the brand that is made up of true real estate professionals, people who really exemplify the honor in this profession.
Yeah. I love that, because I think that, I was in Miami. Actually, we met in Miami, but I was at all of the forums that they had. And the thing that struck me is we have a lot of big companies in America, and they call them big. Well, do you want to be with the biggest company, or do you want to be with somebody that cares about you? And there's like this separation between big and unique, or big and whatever. And where I think we separate ourselves at Coldwell Banker is, you said it, we take stewardship of a history that really has set us apart as not just a big company, but a company that truly cares. I mean, I'm recruited all the time by whomever, and I just tell them there's no reason for me to look anywhere else. I not only have the tools, I have a company that stands behind me, and then I can stand behind them with honor. So I appreciate you using the word stewardship, because that means so much more to me than, hey, I'm with Big Blue or I'm with a big company. Yeah. So I appreciate that thought as a leader. Stewardship is something meaningful to me in my life as far as that's concerned. On the same note, I know you did some coaching, I think, with Liz Bentley at one point. Is that true? Or you talked with her, had an interview with her. She used an analogy called living above the waterline. And I thought that was interesting, because there was kind of a yin and yang to it. There was an interesting thing. I wondered if you could explain that a little bit in your own words and tell me, is that something that you utilize maybe in your thought process or your everyday ongoing
Absolutely,
leadership?
Yes, it is. So it is. I think having the sort of goal to always stay above the waterline is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And essentially what that means is, don't get pulled down into the muck, the details that you're just going to complain about, that are just weighting you down, that don't lend to solutioning and moving forward.
Right.
You can spend a certain amount of time complaining and moaning and venting, but then you've got to move above. Yeah, we all do. It's human nature, right? Sure. But then you've got to move above the waterline and get into being part of the solution and driving things forward.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good gut check for individuals and for teams to say, okay, we spent enough time complaining about this now? Let's get above the waterline, and let's really talk about what we're here to solve, what we're here to achieve, what we're here to drive forward.
Yeah. How do you get, in your leadership role at Coldwell Banker, how do you get the people around you, the leaders around you, to buy into staying above the waterline? And maybe you don't use that language in your meetings or whatever, but at what point do you step back and go, okay, yeah, good points, negative. Okay, now let's move forward. Let's think about it. Let's find a solution and let's implement. And how does that happen how does a leader like yourself implement that overall thought process with your leadership?
I think it starts with listening.
Yeah.
Understanding when that inflection point comes where people are just reiterating the same gripes over and over, and being able to synthesize to say what I've heard are these couple things,
right?
And what I think we need to do with those few things is XYZ, and let's use that as a launch pad for thinking about next steps and what we can get out of this. I think if you dismiss people's natural sort of proclivity to need to complain for a little while, they're just going to feel unheard.
Sure.
But if you let them feel heard, but you cut it off, right? You can't keep going on and on and on. You let them
acknowledge them, right? Okay.
Absolutely. Acknowledge, but also actively listen so that you're pulling out of the vent session things that will help you solve the problem, and that's sort of at the root of all of it.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think calling people out. Listen, I am my team will tell you that I am the first one to say, like, are we done?
Yeah.
Are we done complaining? Because this is the 5th time we've talked about it, and if we don't from here move forward, we're just wasting time.
This episode of Grind to Growth to Greatness is brought to you by Terry Barr, Distinctive Real Estate, advising families across Pennsylvania and Northern Virginia for over 15 years. Visit the website at terrybarrealestate.com.
So just a side note to that, how's that working for you? The last year and a half, let's call it a year. I don't know if it's been that long or not, but
year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Year and a half. How long is it, or how's that working for you? What kind of response are you getting? Anybody that I've ever talked to, and I did talk to a few people about you before this, just seem to be on board with you, your type of leadership. How's that working from your perspective, and what do you see going forward?
So I always tell people, I don't expect anyone to read my mind, and I will waste no time trying to read yours.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to have to worry that you don't know what I'm thinking. I am very direct. I am very transparent, and I'm going to tell you what you need to know in order to succeed. I want everyone to succeed. And I don't think that, sort of hiding around corners or playing politics, it doesn't help anyone. Right. And so my leadership style is kind of based on 3 loose principles, right?
Okay,
the first thing is clarity. I'm super clear on what we're trying to achieve, what I expect of each individual, what their goals are, how they're doing against their goals. I don't think there's anyone in the organization at this point that would say, I don't know what we're trying to do, right? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what Kamini expects. Right. Very, very clear. The second thing is transparency. I try to be incredibly transparent, and I think it's very, very important that organizations are very transparent about the why behind the goals. So clarity about the goals is one thing, but transparency about the why is really important. Not everyone's going to agree 100% of the time with everything that you set forth.
That's a tough one.
You can get people on board. It's very tough.
Yeah.
When you share your thinking, when you share the reasoning, when you're transparent about the why behind decisions, you get people on board even when they disagree.
Right.
And then the last thing is just authenticity.
Yeah.
I think that authenticity fuels both clarity and transparency. If you bring your true authentic self to work every single day, one, I think it unleashes potential, which is something we've talked about.
Right.
I think many of us have wasted time and energy in the past trying to show up in a way that wasn't authentic because we thought that's what was necessary to succeed. And so I think creating a culture where everybody can show up as their true authentic self, and where everyone's really encouraged to communicate in an authentic way so that we're not trying to read each other's minds, so that we do feel like we're having a real conversation, and then we can trust in each other, and we can lean into what we know that we're supposed to be achieving and the why behind what it is we're supposed to be achieving.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thought. My wife is a principal at a school, and she's always having conversations about being authentic as a person, as a leader, to all of her teachers, to all of her staff. And you've got 75 or 80 people under her purview that, they all think differently, and they all want something different, and they all want to complain. But she works really hard at being authentic, and clear, because she feels like then there's really nothing left. They can't complain about it. They understand it. It's clear. She's authentic, and there's a why behind it. Here's what we're trying to do. So that really fits in well with what she tries to do. And she's going to love your comments, because she loves leaders. She loves to listen to leaders, but she loves female leaders because they give a different perspective. And this is a great tool for anybody at any level with a business, I think. Be clear, be transparent, and be authentic. And some of our business is not like that. So it's an absolute great point. Tell me about the most difficult hurdles that you've had. And this is kind of related to leadership. I don't want to, it doesn't have to be specific, but the biggest hurdles overall that you've had the last year and a half, stepping out of let's call it a competitor, into a heritage brand that's, I'm sure there's really high expectations. And Ryan Gorman, great leader, and you've spoken very highly of him. And I had a couple opportunities to meet him. He was a very kind man. I really enjoyed him. But tell me some of the
wonderful human.
Yeah. Tell me some of the hurdles you've run into over the last year and a half.
Well, Coldwell Banker, like we've talked about, 118-year heritage. And one of the things that I think is most unique about Coldwell Banker Realty is that there are people who have decades-long careers. Like they've been at Coldwell Banker for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Right.
Generational businesses. I met someone in Miami whose grandmother started the team that he is now running.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And coming into that as someone who is relatively new to real estate, at that point, I think I'd been in the real estate industry for about 5 years, and relatively new to real estate and brand new to Coldwell Banker, because many of the leaders within Coldwell Banker, started as receptionists or whatever it is, right? But themselves have decades long history with the brand. It's very intimidating. And I sort of had to figure out, how do I lean into this incredibly unique strength when I'm not part of it? I'm a lucky recipient of it, but I'm not part of that. I'm a newbie. And that's where I really kind of leaned into those three principles that we're talking about, and really tried to engender trust, and really tried to help people to see for themselves, not just tell them, but help people to see for themselves that I am here to serve. I am here to shepherd this brand. And I really see it as an honor to be at the helm of a company that is changing lives, and to hopefully be part of changing lives, and to make sure that we have the right people in the right roles doing the right things to power agents' businesses, that we're investing smartly in agents' growth, and that we are celebrating the success of every single person in our organization.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a different business to be in. And, I wrote down, you're here to encourage, you're here to support, and all those things. But you've used three good words that I love, and that's stewardship, to serve, and there was another one, words that you don't hear leaders use a whole lot in big business. And I think they mean so much, because they are meant with feeling versus just knowledge. And I think those are words that land on my ears well. And so I really appreciate that. We got a couple minutes left, and I want to hit on, you spoke about the importance of empowering small business people, and especially small business women. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, what that means to you.
Yeah. So, you sort of mentioned at the onset in the intro, a little bit of my career history. Couple years after college, I had the opportunity to go work for eBay.com, and I was part of the team that ran the men's and women's, the fashion category. So I ran the men's and women's accessories category. I was part of the team that ran the fashion category. And what really drove me in that role was being part of a engine that drove small business owners, people who sold, I don't know, whatever, leftover socks. And people who, had a
Gucci belts.
Shop.
Yep. Sure.
Gucci belts. Yes.
Yep.
People who, there were people whose entire online channel was eBay.
Yeah.
And I saw the power of entrepreneurship in that role. And I kind of mentioned loosely, my father was an entrepreneur.
Right. Inventor.
My entire life. He was an inventor, and he was always spinning up businesses, some that were very successful, some that remained small. He was always sort of thinking about what the next thing was. So it was something that really drove me. I felt accomplished when I saw what I could help others achieve.
Yeah.
And that drives me to this day. Like I said, we have 52,000 real estate agents, 52,000 entrepreneurs within Coldwell Banker. There are people who started off door knocking who now sell billions of dollars of real estate.
Incredible.
And it is absolutely incredible. And I remember talking to one of the top agents in the entire Coldwell Banker Realty network, who was a single mom at the time that she started her real estate career.
There's a couple of those. Yeah, there's a couple of them. It's amazing.
Many.
Yeah.
And I was a single mom for, much of my older daughter's kind of early childhood.
Okay. Yeah.
And this thought of, a household name with her baby in the car seat, and she's door knocking, and now she has sold literally billions of dollars of real estate. Our industry is unique in the opportunity that it affords people who are willing to hustle and work hard and lean into their strengths and lean into their passion. I mean, literally, there is no limit, right? To what someone like that can achieve. And I think it's incredibly powerful.
It is. And I tell you, the relationship and trust are the two biggest words that I fall on all the time. Feed you for a lifetime. And, I tell people I don't chase a dollar bill or a paycheck. I chase relationships and trust, because the end goal or the end fruit of that will be a paycheck. But if you're always chasing the paycheck, you'll end up really having a hard time. So relationships and trust are two of the biggest things. And, you're right. It's a unique situation. It's a unique business that we're in. And there's so many people that have skinned that cat 100 different ways and have done well over the course of their lives. And it's an amazing thing. I just want this to continue. And I want your vision that you have to be something that we can all get a hold of. One more question. You have the ears of a world of young ladies that see you as someone they can look up to, someone they can emulate, and of course a lot of other people as well. But you have the ears of a lot of young people that are looking at you going, I can do that. I can be her. What's your advice to them? What could you impart on them that they could take away and say, I'm going to do that someday?
Yeah, I think the first thing is believe in yourself and learn how to advocate for yourself. If you cannot advocate for yourself, you cannot expect somebody to advocate for you. Right. And do the hard work that gives you the proof points in those conversations when you're advocating for yourself. Don't say, this isn't my job. Don't follow a checklist that's in a job description. Seek out opportunities to make an impact, and then be able to talk about the impact that you've made.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. That's wonderful advice. It's good advice for anybody, but especially for young ladies, sometimes you have bigger hurdles to get over. It's getting better in our society. Obviously, I think 6 out of the 8 leaders under Anywhere Realty are run by women, and so we're making progress in that area. And I think it's wonderful to see so much success, advocating for yourself, making sure that you have those proof points. Wonderful things. So, Kamini, I just want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I know you're in the middle of it. And for you to take time out for our little show here means so much to me. So for all of those folks out there that don't know Kamini, this is a little bit of her history and how she got here and what's on our plate for later. So I just want to thank you for coming in and spending the time. I really appreciate it. And we'll put this out in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we get a lot of views for people that can get a lot of little nuggets of information they can take along and utilize in their own life.
Well, thanks for having me, Terry. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
All right. Take care.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.